I'd first like to read from John 16, verse 7. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth. It is expedient for you that I go away. For if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. But if I depart, I will send him unto you. So the title of the song is Come, Holy Spirit. It's very important that we invite the Holy Spirit into our hearts. So I pray that you all will be blessed by this song and listen to the words carefully.
As you're probably aware, we've been on a journey from Egypt to Canaan. And when I spoke here, we last left them at the golden calf experience. That's Exodus 32. For those who want to open your Bible, that's where we left them. And after that, if you explore God's Word, there's fairly detailed instruction. Because you remember, Moses had interceded for them. And there were detailed instructions about the tabernacle, the Sabbath. And if you think about it, the Bible, space in the Bible is at a premium. It's like if you want advertising space at a certain time, it's at a premium. I mean, it was not like now where you can put it on the internet and just, no. People, because books would wear out, it was all hand copied. So there's a reason God spent so much time in the tabernacle, in the, what did we talk about today in Sabbath school? The sanctuary. That was the first one. And it was because it was supposed to teach them about salvation, about Christ. So it goes over that. And if you look, for example, just in Exodus 39, God's very particular about what they're supposed to wear. And if you remember, God was particular about having steps on the altar. Why? Not to uncover their nakedness. God has a lot of information. Then we get to the book of Leviticus. And Leviticus has a lot of information about specifically the services of the sanctuary. And even you get to the high point, which you all know how the Bible tends to be a chiasm, first and then A and A prime, B and B prime, C and C prime, and then D is right in the middle. Well, basically the Day of Atonement in the book of Leviticus is kind of right in the middle, about chapter 16. And that's basically what, if we spend a lot of time there, that's where we're at in history. We're in the antitypical, because that's a typical. Typical is a type. So antitypical is not type. That's where we're at right now. And I'm not trying to pass over this lightly because it's incredibly important. It talks about all the feasts, the Passover, the Pentecost, the Feast of Trumpets, that type of thing. The Jubilee, all those types of things. That's very important in the book of Leviticus. In fact, one of my very dear friends, Roy Gain, he basically has spent his life on the book of Leviticus, has written a commentary on the book of Leviticus and Numbers. But I'm going to pick up our story in just a few stories beginning in Numbers. If you remember the story in Numbers 3, Nadab and Abihu, they were the first two sons of Aaron, but what happened to them? What happened was, let's just read just very briefly in chapter 3, beginning of the very first verse. These are the generations of Aaron and Moses in the day that the Lord spake with Moses at Mount Sinai. Why is that important that God spoke with Moses at Mount Sinai? God's presence. That's a big deal. So anytime God talks to you, pay attention. These are the names of the son of Aaron. Nadab, Abihu. Nadab, the firstborn, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. And these are the names of the sons of the priests which were anointed, which he consecrated. So how many of them were anointed and consecrated? All four of them. All four of them were. But the very next verse tells about what happened. They died before the Lord. Why? When they offered what? Strange fire before the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai. What does it mean by strange fire? God had lit the fire with his presence, and they were supposed to only use that. That was brought out in the lesson. If you notice, they never allowed that fire to go out. That was brought out in our lesson, and that happened because God had lit the fire, and they decided it's no big deal. Why was it that it was no big deal to them? Turns out they'd been drinking. That's very important. So is temperance important? Does our mind, What is the battle all about? It's a great controversy, and what does God want from us? Voluntary worship. It's all about worship. And where is worship? It's all about the mind, the frontal lobe. And then if you go to Numbers 11, again, it talks about more of the laws that God given them, the offerings. I mean, if you think about it, look at number 7, it just talks about what they're offering. And it's the same thing for like 12 different ones. You wonder, why are they spending that time? Because offerings to the Lord are important. But you read in Numbers 11, what happened there? And when the people complained, if you read in verse 11, what did that do to God's heart? It displeased. So here's just a quick clue. When you go, why were they complaining? They didn't like the food. They didn't like something. So when you find something in your life you don't like, what is the best way to approach God? Man, Lord, why did you do this? Or, Lord, I have your promise. You're going to take care of me. This is going to be resolved in a way that glorifies you. Praise you, praise. What's the best way to approach it? I mean, this is a life lesson to remember. God does not like it when we complain. Lord heard it. Does God hear everything we do? Yes. And his anger was kindled. Is he like us, just really emotional? Is that what it means? What it means is there is sin there. And fire of the Lord burnt among them and consumed them. And what did they do in verse 2? They cried unto Moses, and what did Moses do? He prayed unto the Lord. He interceded for them. Is it important to intercede? If people are coming and having troubles, can you bring them before the Lord? I mean, these are lessons worth remembering. You read it quickly, oh, that happened, poor bad. It's up to them. No, think about it, the lesson for you. Intercede for people. God wants to actually have someone that will stand in the breach. That's what he wants. And then it says, the mixed multitude was among them, fell a-lusting, and the children of Israel wept. Again, you would think they would have gotten over. You'd think they would learn the lesson. There's another thing we need to learn. Sometimes the Lord has to bring over a thing over us, a point multiple times until we finally get it. Do you know it's easier if we just say, Lord, live in me. I give you permission. Remember Dan Thomas's sermons? I give you permission to change me, to do whatever you need to do. Your life will be a little bit easier. Just thought I'd tell you that. Now, we remember the fish which you did eat, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. Were those bad foods? No. But now our soul is dried away and there's nothing besides this manna before our eyes. What should we, whatever lot God has given it, where does it talk about in 1 Thessalonians? In everything give. Do you know? I just had someone remind me yesterday, it's sometimes hard to in everything give thanks. There are certain situations where you're going, Lord, you're going to have to give me the thanks. But God's willing to take that as your offering. Lord, it's not in me, but I'm willing to ask you and give you permission so it will be in me. And Moses, in verse 10, heard the people weep throughout their families. And what happened? Did the Lord hear it too? In verse 10 there, the anger of the Lord was kindled. And was Moses pleased with them? Guys, haven't you learned yet? And that's when when Moses started getting discouraged, from 11 to 15. He's saying, kill me, I can't do this. That's what he says in 15. And God is willing to take the burden off us. God is willing, wants us to talk to him, and God will sustain us. And he's sanctified. And then in verse 31, that's Numbers 11. This is when you need to remember, when you're asking persistently. We've been studying that in our worship, the importance of persistent prayer. But if we persist in what we want, will God sometimes give it to us? Yes. I think one of the statements we read recently is probably one of the worst things that could happen to us if God said yes to all our requests. He sent forth quail. And how did that do? In verse 33. And while the flesh was yet between their teeth, the wrath of the Lord was kindled. And he smote them with a very great plague. But I want to get to the story in Numbers 14. 13 and 14. The spies. Now, is it God had promised he would take them? Is it bad to have as much information as you can about a place? No. But is it best to ask God if he even wants us to get that before we send him off? So, in verse 13, send thou men that they may search Canaan, God had said. And so they found, and they said the name of each of these men, and they were charged to go about it. And so they went, in verse 21. And then in verse 26, they came back in verse 24 with a grape of clusters, took 2 men to carry it. And they'd been searching it for what? 40 days. And when they came back, they gave their report. And they said, we came to the land where you weathered. This is Numbers 13, verse 27. And it sure flows with milk and honey, and this is the fruit. However, in verse 28, the people be strong that dwell in the land. Cities are walled and very great. We saw the children of Anak. Who are the children of Anak? They were local NBA guys. They were way taller than everyone. And the Amalekites dwell in the south, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains, the Canaanites by the sea. It's already taken. There's no room for us, and they're all stronger than we are. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses. Let's go at once. But the men that went up with him said, we be not able to go against the people, for they're stronger than we. Were they right? Yes. They could not go up against it. What did they forget? They weren't the ones that had promised it would happen. If God has said it, can God lie? They forgot who was with them. How often do we forget who is with us at any moment? Lord, I can't do this. He's going, yep, you got that part right. Now will you remember the next part? I can do it. I can do all things through myself because I conquer everyone. Is that how the verse goes? No, I can do all things through Christ that strengthens me. That's what they forgot. And in chapter 14, all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and they wept, and they murmured. Now here, be careful what you pray. Look what their prayer was. Would to God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or we died in the wilderness. That's what they prayed. You know, God answered their prayer. And wherefore hath the Lord, in verse 3, brought us into this land to fall by the sword? Were it not better for us to return to Egypt? And they said, let us make a captain, let us return to Egypt. You know, if you read the same story in Nehemiah chapter 9, I think it's verse 18 or 19, it says they actually made a captain to return to Egypt. Now here's just a quick aside. If you are elected by the people to take God's people back to Egypt, don't take the job. It's a really bad job. It's not going to go well with you. So just put it out there. They actually elected a captain to do that. And Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. And Caleb and Joshua pled with the people in verse 7. The land which you pass through is good. Lord, if the Lord delighted, he will bring us inland. So they were telling the truth. But all the congregation was about ready to what? In verse 10. Stone them with stones. And then who shows up? The glory of God appeared in the tabernacle congregation. And verse 11 he asked Moses, how long will this people provoke me? It says, in verse 12, I will smite them with pestilence and disinherit them and make thee a greater nation. Moses said, no, let's do it your way. And God's talking to them. And he says in verse 17, and now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great according as thou hast spoken. The Lord is what? Long-suffering, great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, by no means clearing the guilty. Where is he quoting that from? When God had shown himself. Remember, he said, show me thy glory. He's quoting God. He's claiming God's promises. That's why God can't lie. So that's why it's good to know what God has said. If you claim God's promises to him, he cannot lie. Pardon, I beseech thee, in verse 19, the iniquity of this people according unto the greatness of thy mercy, even as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt. Keep forgiving, I pray. But here is what happens. The Lord said unto Moses, how long, in verse 26, how long shall I bear with this evil congregation? I've heard the murmurings. And verse 28, as truly as I live, saith the Lord, if you have spoken in my ears, so will I do to you. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years upwards, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into land concerning which I swore unto you. But as your little ones, in verse 31, which ye said will be a prey, them will I bring in. And then let's land on verse 34. After the number of the days in which ye search the land, even 40 days, each day for a year, ye shall bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know the breach of my promise. Why is that significant? What he is actually telling them, and that's where I want to take off from this morning, is they now know when they will get to the promised land. It's going to be 40 years. That's what he's telling them. They didn't have a set date when they set out. Because of circumstances and their stubbornness of heart, they're going to be 40 years in the wilderness, but at the end of 40 years, they are going in. And remember, this whole series is Egypt to Canaan, but we are spiritual Israel going to, from spiritual Egypt, which we've just been studying in Daniel 11, we're going into literal heaven, literal spiritual Canaan, which is heaven. So where are we now in the stream of time in comparison to those 40 years? They've been wandering 40 years in the wilderness, but then they knew when they'd go in, and we'll pick up the story in a bit about that. But if you think about it, we knew as a denomination, 1844 came, they had misinterpreted, like we talked about, what was happening, but we also are told if they had continued fervently, the work would have been done, they would have been in. And then we got even clearer light in 1888 that God could have come, and the latter rain in its fullness was beginning to fall. But then, as a people, we did not go in. So from 1888 to now, that's 12 plus 24, that's 36, 130. We're way worse than they are. It only took them 40 years so nothing to say. But where are we? How do we know we're really near? Well, I'm sure you've heard of this, so I'm going to go over it very briefly because I'm sure you're well acquainted. The concept of the week of time. You know, God works in an orderly fashion, and 7 is very important. How many days was the world created in? 6,000, 1 year of rest, so 7 years. That's what just about every other event in our life, there's some celestial, but the weekly 7 is a God-ordained thing. There isn't anything else. And God works in 7s. That's a very important, the weekly Sabbath, the Jubilee, that was what was talked about in Leviticus. We passed over but it talks about 7 being very important. Well, 1 day in God's sight is as 1,000 years. So God has basically allowed for the sin issue about 6,000 years. And we have, from the spirit of prophecy, the idea that if you look at it carefully, Ms. White says about 4,000 years, and there are statements mentioning that from Christ's birth, which was in 3 BC, his baptism 27, and his death and resurrection, which was 31. So, and I think the reason it was done that way is so we wouldn't say, this year, that's the end of time. What we're knowing is we are near the end of 6,000 years for this world. And if you look, and I have been noticing this, I've listened to different speakers, and I highly recommend, if this type of subject interests you, Walter Veith has several talks on this, And I'll also point you to a series that has impacted me recently because it brings out the very point we brought out in our lesson about how the sanctuary is so important and why God needs, because this 6,000 years is going to end, and God is going to have, did you hear me say is going to have, a people that will stand for Him. And one of the sobering things is if you look at how many people there were before the flood, how many were saved? 8 were saved, and I don't know all those were righteous, to be quite honest with you. And we know how many were saved out of Sodom. 4 came out, 1 turned into a pillar of salt. How many were righteous? 1. And you look at the percentage, you think, it's hopeless. No, it isn't. Did you know God would have died just for you? Which means you cannot control any of your family members. You can intercede for them. You can control your own decision. And if you every day are asking Him into your life, confessing your sin, asking Him to live through you, do you know He will save you? That's why you don't have to worry about the numbers thing. It could be overwhelming. One of the points, I was talking to one of the coworkers that's going through a lot of stresses, and one of the points I made to her was, do you know how wonderful it is to just live in the moment, to not borrow tomorrow's troubles, because you don't have them anyway, and let God take care of those, and praise Him for the blessings, because I promise you there are blessings going on. Just the fact that you can walk and move and eat and feed yourself, those are blessings, and have food to feed yourself with. Anyway, we are very near the end of the 6,000 years God has allotted for this whole sin issue. And as has been brought out by some of these speakers, I was going to finish talking about Jeremiah Davis. The point he's made is he brings out this business about 6,000 years, but he also brings out why it's so important that God has a people that will stand for Him even in the most horrible times, which is what Noah did in the antediluvian. And we know Christ tells us, Jesus tells us, that as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be. And I keep imagining, how could it get worse? I remember as a child I wondered, how could it be the thoughts of everyone's heart is evil continually? How can that be? You know what I figured out why that is? I'll give you one clue. I don't know if you notice, anytime you're working with someone, if there's a downtime, what's the first thing they do? Evil. Do you know how much of that is good that you're watching? Not much. Most of it is to get your attention, which means, anyway, we are near the end. And as has been brought out, for this all to happen, there's going to be a Sunday law. There's going to be a time of trouble. God can cut it short in mercy. And if you look at some of these, and I'm not talking about Seventh-day Adventists, I'm talking about people seeing what's going on in the world. Do you know what date comes out consistently over and over again for things to happen? I'll bet you can tell me. This fall is one, but what's a date that really consistently comes out? 2030. 2030. 2030. And yet it comes out even sooner because, remember, it could be cut short. So I think we are desperately near the end of the time. Now, just to reiterate some of these points that tells us how close we are in how many ways. One of the things that occurs to me is financially, how absolutely desperately close we are. I have lived through a hyperinflation, and I was listening to a speaker who said they are unaware of any economy that goes into hyperinflation that ever survives it. There has to be something reset. And we are there. What people that look at it go, you know, the United States, it seems to be purposeful. Whatever decision that could make it come out worse has been made. I mean, our currency is based only on faith. They're hyper-printing and spending money everywhere. Most of the other countries in the world are going to what you call the BRICS currency. Most of the other countries are no longer buying our debt. They're letting it expire and then buying gold instead. They're trying to paper it over until the election this fall. But that's not going to happen much longer. And when our economy, our money becomes worthless, what is going to happen? People aren't going to be able to get paid to work. They're going to stop working. They're going to stop delivering. There's going to be things aren't going to be delivered to the cities. Cities are going to collapse, and when people don't have food, don't have necessities, don't have energy, they become a little bit grumpy. In fact, they start going out into the countryside and causing chaos, and that's when you start seeing civil war and that type of thing. I don't even need to mention how much it's now coming out, how these shots that were, when they were given, they are actually a bioweapon. And there have been predictions by some and that anyone that took it potentially could be dead within a very short number of years. I don't think that is going to be correct because God in His mercy won't allow it. But there is certainly known to be excess mortality going on. We know our weather, that we are told how the devil studies weather to try to engineer it. Is it for our good or for our evil? There's horrible stuff going on in that regard. If we talk about wars, there are people who are saying, in actuality, World War III has already begun. And if you think about it, when there is a collapse of an economy, when there's that type of thing, the people that stay in power, what's one of the best ways to distract the populace? Start a war. Because they can say, oh, we can't have an election, there's an emergency going on. We are on the brink of that. I could go on about all the civil unrest, about people coming in who have not been vetted and are not here to do any good to this country. So, with that in mind, the important thing is, what is God waiting for? And that's a point that was brought out in our lesson study. He has a time when it will. Remember, we know that the cups, when it gets a certain point, God says, okay, enough. But He also needs to demonstrate to the universe that He has a people that will follow Him, that are living, that He is living through them, no matter what the situation. And the reason the devil hates this whole concept is because he has the idea, okay, if I can just keep them distracted and the clock runs out and God can't prove to the universe He has a people that are going to stand for Him and that have Him, therefore don't even need a mediator because they are completely filled with Christ, then He says, I won. He says, I lost the cross, but I could win this. No, He won't. God will win. So that's why this message is so incredibly important. God is, as we have already said, in the most holy place. We are in the antitypical Day of Atonement. Remember, the Day of Atonement was the most holy day of the Jewish calendar, where the high priest did the mediation, and then when he finishes, he comes out, lays it on the scapegoat, who is Satan, and that's when Christ comes. He is investigating all who have claimed to be His followers throughout all of history, and as was brought out again, He started with Adam and Abel, and He's moved through, and now to the living. Is it a scary thing to have your name before the judgment? I'd say yes and no. Yes, if you don't have Christ living in you. No, if you have completely surrendered and said, Lord, I am not worthy, but You are. You can live within me. You have paid the price for my sins. Live with me all the time. Then it's not scary because it's now His responsibility. That's how we can live in joy, because let me tell you, if you read in Daniel 12, when Michael stands up, that means when he stands up, he's done. He's ready to come out of the temple. What's it say about that right in that area? There'll be a time of trouble such as, and you know, there have been some really, really, really bad times of trouble. If you look at the history of China, of Cambodia, even of Germany for the Jews, bad times of trouble. Expect it. And when that happens, do you throw it in the Lord's face? You failed me. Because the title of the sermon, I haven't told you the title of the sermon. God's protective hand. Really? Really? Here's the point you have to realize. What is God most concerned about? The first death or the second death? Why is the second death the one that's most important? It's eternal. You don't come back from it. Which death did Christ die? That's why He could not see through the portals of the tomb, because He died the second death for us, because the wages of sin is death. But he resurrected, he came back. That's why he has the keys, and he's willing to give us that. So, therefore, when we see all these things that happened to the children of Israel, and to any one of us, if you think about it, look at the case of John the Baptist. Was he a follower of Jesus? Yes, he was. He was taken, he grew up outdoor. He was the ultimate outdoor guy. I mean, the ultimate camper, really, he was. And where was he in? After he served God with all his heart and proclaimed Christ the Messiah coming, where did he get put? In prison. And then afterwards, what happened to him? He got his head chopped off. Did God fail him? Do you know when God allows that to happen to you, what does that mean? You're forever away from anything Satan can do more to you. You're just waiting for the resurrection and the life. That's what we're doing. Remember Job's story. He lost first his stuff. How quickly did he lose his stuff when God took away the protection, let the devil have full control? So just so you know, no matter how much stuff you have, it can go away really, really, really quickly. Don't hang on to any stuff. And then what else did he lose? His kids. And he kind of lost his wife because she wasn't at his side supporting him. And then what else did he lose? His health. And then what else did he lose? His friends came. What did they tell him? You did horrible stuff. That's why it happened. He says, actually, I didn't. And so what was God's answer to what was all this is going on? You know what his answer was? You don't have the big picture. That was what his answer was. And that's when Job says, you know, you're right. I'll let you be God and I won't. Do you know that's a good prayer for us to do when we're in trouble? Lord, I'm going to let you be God on this. Which means I'm going to praise you because you're God. I mean, we already even discussed a little bit Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, they have a wonderful witness to say, Lord, our God can protect us. And even if he lets us die, we're still going to follow him. Because if you think about it, Jesus had, which were his three closest disciples? Peter, James, and John. Jesus spent the most time training those three. What happened to James? He's the earliest one that got killed. What a waste! How could God let that happen? And then Herod said, that's a really good situation. I'll get Peter next. And what happened? God delivered him. You can look at that in Acts 12. The point is, God is protecting you. But you have to let him be God. So, just to review where we are from the message today. Where are we in the grand scheme of time? On this earth, in the sin issue, where are we? We're the final generation.
Absolutely.
And I can remember even from childhood, oh, my parents said that, oh, my grandparents, it's going to keep going on. I'm going to tell you, if you're paying attention, you don't have to be a Christian or a Bible student. If you just listen to the people who are looking around, they're going, this is not going to go on. There's going to be a major change, and it's going to be very painful. All that, I'll translate that for you. Devil's taking control. That's what that means. And so what is Jesus watching for? This is not a trick question. A people who will stand without a mediator because they don't need one because he's living in them. That's what he's asking for. So how do we do that? Colossians 1:27. I really think that could have been our scripture song as well. Colossians 1:27. I'm going to get, if Tori, would you read that in your loud voice? Colossians, how do you do this?
1:27.
Please.
To whom God will make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory.
Amen. Is that a promise? Christ in you. So with that in mind, that's my call to each one of us. Invite Christ into your life. Surrender absolutely everything. Confess your sins. In my studies this morning, what God brought to me, He says, it is a fearful thing to turn away from anything Christ shows you. Because how do you commit the sin against the Holy Spirit? Don't respond. Because He will still be coming at you full force. But if you block your mind to it, pretty soon you cannot be reached because of your choice. So that's my appeal to each one of us. Submit to the Lord. Moment by moment, surrender everything, ask Him, and then give Him not only your present problems, but your future ones. Because you think you can read the future. Guess what? You can't. And that's actually a good thing, just in case you're wondering. You don't want to. You want Him to be in control of that. So with that in mind, if you agree with me, let us stand and sing hymn 99. God will take care of you.